Welcome everyone. We're excited to have you all with us here today for a webinar on MetaGeek's inSSIDer Office and Chanalyzer wireless analysis software. Our presenters today are Aham Eriksousi. He's the category manager for Arachnus Networks, and we also have Joel Crane from MetaGeek. My name is Heidi Nilsson, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I want to run through a few quick housekeeping items with you. I know you're all wondering if you can get a copy of today's presentation, and the answer to that is yes. We will be sending you a follow-up email within about 2 business days, and that will include a recording of today's session, and we'll also have a coupon code for you that's good for $50 off the MetaGeek Basic, Pro, or Advanced package, so definitely watch out for that email. And lastly, we invite you to send in any questions you have through the question and answer feature in the webinar control panel, and we'll answer those as they come in. And if we have a few minutes at the end of the webinar, we'll take a few live as well. All right, now that that's out of the way, I will turn it over to Aham.
Thanks, Heidi. Hey guys, thanks a lot for joining us today. We're very excited. Seeing a lot of dealers are passionate about this topic, and it's a continuation to our series of Wi-Fi and access points in general. Today, it's a great announcement, and we're very excited to officially announce the partnership that we introduced in the last webinar with MetaGeek. So I'll go over a few quick slides, just a reminder, and then turn it over to Joel from MetaGeek, and he will take you through the bulk of the presentation. So if you remember that we covered in past webinar, and if you don't, there's a document online about the 10 steps for Wi-Fi success. And these are the, in general, the top 10 steps that we recommend for every mid to large installation with Wi-Fi in order to ensure success. So the first step being invest in learning and tools. Second step being documentation. Third being customer interview to understand their needs and their past experiences and their requirements and kind of applications they use. Fourth step is to do some, initial site survey, plan the location of the access points, know, if you wanted to go if there's a trouble area in the fridge or in the kitchen area, or if there are metal studs somewhere, just plan it around those areas. And then hopefully you want that job, you go install, then oversee our cloud platform for initial setup, and then heat mapping and fine-tuning the overlap, especially if you have a multiple access point environment. Make sure that follow the guidelines of using different channels for adjacent access points, and you dial your power output for adjacent access points to have some sort of overlap, but not a lot of overlap, to optimize the roaming experience. And then Step 8, to test and validate the performance of your Wi-Fi network, and it doesn't hurt to throw in a couple of the applications that the customer told you about that they will use on a daily basis, and make sure those services are running properly and smoothly, for example, Netflix. Before the last step is going to be back up your configuration files, back up your documentation, finalize your notes if you find any funky area in the job, if you found any trouble area, if you did any special requirements, just everything is documented for future reference. And it doesn't hurt to share your findings as a report with your customer and your client and close the job. And Joel will walk us through some of those great tools that Chanalyzer offer. So we just zooming into step 1. We mentioned that basically for Wi-Fi you need essentially 2 kinds of tools. There's a spectrum analysis and there's site survey. And the spectrum analyzer will help you determine what channel on the Wi-Fi to put your client's Wi-Fi network on. You want to be on the channel that is least congested. And the site survey tool will help you heat map the coverage and the trouble areas and make sure that everything is performing at optimal level. With that, no further ado, we are very excited to announce a partnership with MetaGeek. Well, MetaGeek has, a lot of great tools and a lot of great products that you can buy directly from MetaGeek a la carte. We try, work with the experts and the professionals at MetaGeek, like Joel, to package those products in a manner that makes sense for the installers. So we provide 4 basic packages. We got the basic package, the professional package, the advanced package, and the heat mapping package. So today, Joel will walk us through the basic and the professional package and their content, and there will be another session. I think it's in mid-August. We'll send you the reminder for that and the invitation for it for the advanced package. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Joel, and he will take it from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Ahem. So while he's getting the screen shared over to me, let's see, we'll get that going really quick here. So thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it. My name's Joel, and I take care of pretty much all the training functions here at MetaGeek as the lead trainer here. I do things like teach webinars like these and create knowledge-based articles, YouTube videos, things like that. And so it's a lot of fun. I love working with our customers. I love training people. I think it's a ton of fun, so I think we're going to have a great webinar today. If you want to keep in touch, if you have any questions or anything after the webinar is over, feel free to follow me on Twitter. My Twitter feed is probably about 75% Wi-Fi related, so if you want to kind of keep an eye on that kind of thing, feel free to follow me there. I have a few certifications that say that I know stuff. Whether that's true or not, I'm not really sure. But if you do wireless very often, I highly recommend getting involved in some of the certification processes out there. There's some great certs out there. I especially love the CWNP program that provides things like the CWNA and CWAP. Those are great vendor-neutral certifications if you're looking to learn more and more and more about Wi-Fi. A little bit of an introduction about MetaGeek as well. We're a small company out of Boise, Idaho. Idaho's over next to Oregon and Washington that makes easy-to-use wireless troubleshooting tools. The two that we're going to talk about today are the inSSIDer Office and Chanalyzer, and those both work with the Wi-Spy hardware. We're proud to say that Wi-Spy, all the Wi-Spy devices are made right here in the U.S. We make them right here in Boise, actually, with real 100% Idaho-grown potatoes. So kind of a quick just agenda so you know what to expect throughout the course of this webinar. Part 1 is going to be kind of some quick Wi-Fi fundamentals. When you're trying to use these wireless troubleshooting tools, it's really important to understand just kind of some of the basics of Wi-Fi. And while I have a feeling that the majority of you are very familiar with these kinds of things, there might be a couple people that would benefit from that. So we'll start out by covering the half-duplex nature of Wi-Fi. That's one of the core building blocks of understanding Wi-Fi and how it works. We'll talk about the differences between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, the different types of interference that you'll see with Wi-Fi, as well as different types of tools that you can use to detect those different types of interference. In part 2, we'll jump over into the live demos. We'll start out with a demo of inSSIDer Office and the Wi-Spy DBX. I'll show you how to use that to pick the best channels for your wireless network, whether you're doing a single access point setup or a multi-access point setup, how to configure the best settings for your wireless network in general, and measure coverage. After that, we'll look at just a couple more slides to introduce Chanalyzer and the Wi-Spy from that perspective, and we'll talk about how to identify sources of interference in the spectrum, things like microwave ovens and cordless phones and wireless video cameras. I'll show you how to identify that and then track down those sources of interference, and then we'll finish up with some examples of different types of interference that you might see in the spectrum. And then after that, I'll hand it back over to the Arachnus team to finish up the webinar. So let's get started. The first thing that we need to talk about is the half-duplex nature of Wi-Fi. Now, what does half-duplex mean? Now, I'm sure that all of us are familiar with an Ethernet cable, and with an Ethernet cable, we can send traffic in multiple directions at the same time on the same Ethernet cable thanks to multiple twisted pairs of copper inside the cable. It's kind of like a two-lane highway. We can send traffic east and west on a two-lane highway simultaneously, and that, in an Ethernet cable, is called full duplex connectivity. Wi-Fi, on the other hand, is half duplex, which means that only one device can talk at a time. It's kind of like a human conversation. If you're talking to somebody and they say something and you say something at the exact same time, they're not able to understand you and you're not able to understand them. In a human conversation, only one person can talk at a time, and it's the exact same way with Wi-Fi. If we have an access point that tries to transmit, and if we have a client device that tries to transmit at the same time, they're simply going to cancel each other out. Neither of them are going to be able to understand each other. So what does a wireless conversation communication typically look like? Well, when we've got a couple of Wi-Fi devices that are communicating, if we've got an access point here that needs to send some data to this client device, what's going to happen is the access point is going to do a clear channel assessment. It's going to listen in on the channel and see if anything is talking. And if there's nothing talking, it's going to transmit some data over to that client device. And the client device will check that data, make sure they can understand the data, and then it will go, yep, check, I understood the data, and it's going to reply with an ACK. An ACK is short for an acknowledgement. So Wi-Fi is this constant process of sending data and receiving an acknowledgement, sending data and receiving an acknowledgement. Now, this doesn't always work perfectly. Things can go wrong here. If we transmit some data and maybe that data gets garbled along the way before it gets to the laptop, that can happen for several reasons. Another device can start talking and interrupt that data transmission. Or maybe the laptop is just so far away that it's having a hard time understanding that signal. When that happens, the laptop isn't going to receive that data. It isn't gonna go, yep, check, I understood the data, and it's definitely not going to reply with that acknowledgement. So after a few moments, the access point is going to start wondering, well, okay, I never heard a response from the laptop, so it must not have received the data frame. So it's going to resend that data, and it's going to keep trying to resend that data until finally the data is received by the client device, and the client device can go, yep, check, I understood that data, and it can reply with the acknowledgement. I'd like to think that Wi-Fi is a lot like my 4-year-old daughter in this way. I've got a daughter that's 4 years old, and if she says something to me, and if I don't send her some kind of acknowledgement, she will simply repeat herself over and over and over and over again until finally something makes it through to me and I send her some kind of acknowledgement. So if you've ever had kids, or if you've ever been around kids, or maybe if you've just seen a kid from a distance, you know that kids are a lot like Wi-Fi in that way. They will simply keep repeating themselves until they finally get that message through. The big point, the big takeaway here is that on any given channel at any given time, only one Wi-Fi device can talk, only one device can talk at a time. So what's it look like when we have multiple devices on the channel? The same rule applies. Only one device can talk at a time. If we've got an Android phone here that is currently transmitting some data to this access point, all the other devices on the channel have to be quiet and shut up and wait for their turn to talk. Only one device can talk at a time. And remember, this includes neighboring networks as well. If you've got a neighbor nearby that has an access point on the exact same channel, all that access point and all the devices connected to it are going to have to take turns talking as well. Only one device can talk on a channel at a time. And speaking of channels, let's talk about the differences between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz for just a moment. Perhaps the greatest, the most well-known thing about the 2.4 gigahertz band is that it has a range advantage. It's got a much greater range than the 5 gigahertz band. In the 2.4 gigahertz band, most vendors are going to advertise about a 300-foot range. Now, it's going to depend on your environment, what the building materials are made out of, what kind of equipment you have, but most vendors are going to say about 300 feet. The 5 gigahertz band, on the other hand, has a much lower indoor range, only about 90 feet. Why is that? Why do we see such a big difference regarding the range? Well, it's because 2.4 gigahertz is a lower frequency, and because it's a lower frequency, those wavelengths are literally longer. They're a longer wavelength, and so they do a better job of going through stuff. It punches through walls and doors and people and filing cabinets and desks and things like that much better than 5 gigahertz. The 5 gigahertz band has the wavelengths are a lot closer together because it's a higher frequency, and so it attenuates more. It just doesn't go through stuff nearly as well. 2.4 gigahertz is also universally compatible. If you go out and buy a Wi-Fi device, you're guaranteed 2.4 gigahertz support, absolutely guaranteed. Whereas in the 5 gigahertz band, we see limited compatibility. And the reasons for this go all the way back to 1997 when the original 802.11 standard was formed. And that was a 2.4 gigahertz standard. And everything goes back to that original standard. A couple of years later, both 802.11b was introduced and 802.11a. 802.11a being a brand new 5 gigahertz standard that was a lot faster than 802.11b. But there was kind of a format war between the two, kind of like Betamax versus VHS video cassettes way back in the day, and a little bit more recently Blu-ray versus HD DVD. 802.11a did not really catch on. It didn't really end up becoming popular. Now, maybe the chipsets were more expensive to build for 5 gigahertz, or maybe it's because there was no backwards compatibility with the older standards that had already been invented, or maybe it was because of that lower indoor range. Whatever the reason, 802.11a didn't catch on, but 802.11b absolutely did. And when 802.11g came out in 2003, That fueled the fire for 2.4 gigahertz, and 2.4 gigahertz became immensely popular, whereas 5 gigahertz is still playing catch-up today. We still see limited compatibility with the 5 gigahertz band because of all that stuff that happened quite a while ago, nearly 20 years ago at this point. Now, 2.4 gigahertz, since it's kind of been the default band for so long now, it's highly congested with Wi-Fi. There's tons of Wi-Fi there. It's also plagued with non-Wi-Fi interference. That nice long wavelength that makes 2.4 gigahertz propagate so nicely is really great for non-Wi-Fi devices as well. So there are perhaps hundreds of thousands of different types of consumer devices that operate in the 2.4 gigahertz band. Think things like baby monitors and microwave ovens and cordless phones and wireless subwoofers. There's tons of examples of those things out there. And perhaps the biggest problem with the 2.4 gigahertz band, the biggest problem is that there are only 3 channels to work with in the 2.4 gigahertz band, whereas in 5 gigahertz we have 24 channels to work with. And you remember how we talked about the half-duplex nature of Wi-Fi and how only one device can talk on a channel at a time. That means that we have a limited amount of throughput, a limited capacity per channel, and so 5 gigahertz gives us a lot more room for a lot more capacity. Now you might be thinking to yourself, okay, hang on a second, Joel. You're telling me that there's only 3 channels in the 2.4 gigahertz band, but I've configured an access point or 2 in my day. I'm pretty sure there's more than that. Well, you're totally right, but here's the problem. The problem is that each wireless channel is a total of 20 megahertz wide. That's the total width of the channel, but 2.4 gigahertz as a whole, as far as what we're allowed to use for Wi-Fi, is really only about 60 megahertz wide. And so you do some math, 60 divided by 20, you realize that there's really only enough room in the 2.4 gigahertz band for 3 channels. So how do we have 11 channels in the 2.4 gigahertz band if there's only enough room for 3 channels? Well, here's how it works. The channels are marked by their center. So if we look at the center of channel 1, there it is. And each channel center is separated by 5 megahertz. So there's 5 megahertz of space between the center of channel 1 and the center of channel 2. But they're all still 20 megahertz wide. And so if we look at channel 1 and we start at channel 1 and we increment up 5 megahertz, that puts us right at the center of channel 2. And you look at that and you realize that they overlap by about 75%. There's about 75% overlap between channel 1 and channel 2. And you realize that most of the channels in the 2.4 gigahertz band, they partially overlap in some way. The only 3 channels that do not overlap are channels 1, 6, and 11. Those are the only 3 channels in the 2.4 gigahertz band that don't overlap. So the next question that you might have is, okay, well, why does that matter? Why does it matter? Why does that matter if those channels overlap? Well, it's because of the different types of interference that we see in Wi-Fi. There's 2 primary types of interference. I'm going to show you a third type later on, but for now, there's 2 types of interference that we have to worry about. The first is co-channel interference. And co-channel interference occurs, well, we've actually been talking about it quite a bit in this webinar already. We talked about the half-duplex nature of Wi-Fi and how devices that are sharing a channel have to take turns. And that's exactly what co-channel interference is. Co-channel interference is kind of like a dinner table conversation. Last week, my wife and I, we had some friends over, and we fed the kids first and sent them out in the backyard to play so that we could have, some peace and quiet as adults and eat our dinner in peace. And we had dinner with our friends, and there were only 4 of us at the dinner table. And when you have 4 people at the dinner table, everybody gets plenty of time to be involved in the conversation. There's not so many people that you can't get a word in. We all had a nice conversation where we all got to be involved and say what was on our minds and say what we wanted to say, and it was really nice. But when you get lots of people at a dinner table, your opportunities to talk get smaller and smaller and smaller. Maybe every year or so, maybe you go to your in-laws' house or your family's house or something like that for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or something like that. And if you have a lot of people there, maybe all the aunts and the uncles and all the cousins and nieces and nephews are all there. If you've got all your family there and you all cram around one big dinner table, then let's say maybe you have 15, 20, 25, maybe even 30 people all crammed around one dinner table. Your opportunities to talk get smaller and smaller and smaller the more people you put around that dinner table. You've got a bunch of people around the table that all want to get involved in the conversation, and they all want to say what they want to say. And if politics comes up, there's no way you're getting a word in that conversation. And so that's what co-channel interference is. Co-channel interference works great as long as there aren't too many devices on the channel. If you put too many devices on the channel, their opportunities to talk get smaller and smaller and smaller. Every client and access point on the same channel is going to compete for time to talk. Now, adjacent channel interference is very unlike co-channel interference. In this situation, in an adjacent channel interference situation, we might have an access point and all of its client devices on channel 4, and maybe another access point and all of its client devices on channel 5, and another access point and all of its devices on channel 6. All three of those networks partially overlap. And the problem is that instead of politely taking turns talking like we do with adjacent channel interference, or like we do with co-channel interference rather, adjacent channel networks aren't going to politely take turns talking. They're just going to yell and scream over each other instead. It's a lot like the dinner table analogy, but this time at a restaurant. Let's say that you go to a restaurant with some friends and you get a table for 4 and you sit down and you start having a conversation. But you're in a restaurant, so you're not the only people there. There's other tables nearby with other people having their own conversations. Now, they're not taking turns talking with you because they're at their own tables, but you can still hear them, and they can still hear you. So to compensate, you might talk a little bit louder, and then they might talk a bit louder. And that keeps going on and on and on until pretty soon the restaurant's really noisy, and you're having to ask people at your table to repeat themselves. You're having to say, I'm sorry, what was that? I just can't quite hear you. It's super noisy in here. That's what adjacent channel interference does. It causes devices to yell and scream over each other, so they interrupt each other, so they have to repeat themselves, which causes more co-channel interference, which just brings everything spiraling down. If everybody everywhere always used channels 1, 6, and 11 exclusively, we could eliminate adjacent channel interference entirely. We could completely get rid of it, and that would make the 2.4 gigahertz band work better for everybody. So how do we detect interference? Well, there's a couple of ways you can do this. The traditional way is with a Wi-Fi scanner. A Wi-Fi scanner just uses a normal Wi-Fi adapter to scan for wireless networks, just a typical off-the-shelf Wi-Fi adapter. And so with that, we're able to plot out where all of those wireless networks are in the spectrum. So for example, we can see that there's an access point here on channel 1, there's a couple of access points on channel 6, and then we've got a few access points on channel 11, but there's also these ones that are on these non-standard channels looks like channel 9 and channel 10 that are causing all of this adjacent channel interference. And a Wi-Fi scanning tool like inSSIDer, for example, is really, really great for that. It's really, really great to be able to see what channels everything is on. And then you could make some channel decisions. You can go, oh, okay, well, the name of my network is Mountain West Group. Maybe I need to move over to channel 1. That's the channel that's got the least amount of networks on it right there. And so we could get rid of the adjacent channel interference, and everything should work better for everybody. And it's a really great tool for being able to do things like that. But the problem is that we miss some data with this. There's some information that we miss. Like, how busy is channel 1, really? Is it being used 10% of the time? Is it being used 90% of the time? We have no idea. We don't know how busy that channel actually is. And also, is there any non-Wi-Fi devices there that might cause interference? We don't know. The problem is that a Wi-Fi adapter only speaks Wi-Fi, and it can't see anything else. So we can't see how busy the channel is. We can't see interference from non-Wi-Fi devices. And so with a normal Wi-Fi scanning tool that just uses a normal Wi-Fi adapter, we miss a lot of information. And that's where spectrum analysis comes in. A spectrum analyzer is a special piece of hardware that can hear all of the raw radio frequency activity in your environment. It can hear everything. It can hear cordless phones. It can hear wireless video cameras. It can even hear interference from microwave ovens. And most importantly, we can see Wi-Fi channel congestion. We can see how busy each channel is. So we can look at channel 1 and go, oh, okay, channel 1's only being used about 20% of the time, so that channel's got plenty of time left on it for other devices. But channel 11 looks like it's a huge mess from a spectrum standpoint. So spectrum analysis gives us a lot more information about what's going on in our environment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into a live demo with inSSIDer Office and the Wi-Spy. One more thing that I'll show you before we do that, but I'm going to show you how to select the best channel for either your single access point or multi-access point network. I'll show you how to avoid co-channel interference, avoid adjacent channel interference, and avoid those channels that have lots of utilization, and also show you how inSSIDer Office can recommend the best settings for your wireless network, and then we'll talk about how to verify coverage. One thing before we get into that, though, so there's one thing that's pretty critical for you to understand about these tools, and this is true of both inSSIDer Office and it will be true in Chanalyzer later on, is that we group together access points in two ways. In physical grouping mode, we take all of the virtual SSIDs on your access point and we group them together as one item. It groups together virtual SSIDs on the same access point. And so that way we can look at individual radios on the access point instead of having to wade through whole bunches of SSIDs if you're using virtual SSIDs. And then the second way that we group things is with logical grouping mode. In logical grouping mode, we take all of the access points that have the same SSID and we group those together. So for example, here at MetaGeek, we've got about 8 access points here, and in logical grouping mode, both inSSIDer Office and Chanalyzer will group them together as one line item. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to the demo. This will take me just a second to get it started up. And so what this software is going to do is it's actually going to pull data from 2 sources. Both Chanalyzer and inSSIDer Office do this. They're going to pull Wi-Fi data from your onboard Wi-Fi adapter, and then they're also going to pull spectrum analysis data from the Wi-Spy. And the really fantastic thing about that is that those 2 types of data really complement each other, and so you can really get a complete picture of what is going on. Okay, so this is what inSSIDer Office looks like, and there are 3 main areas that I want you to focus on. First off, we can change between physical and logical mode with these buttons up here. These are what change between the physical and logical mode, where we're grouping together by radio or grouping together by access point group. This view in the center, this is our list of all of the wireless networks that our Wi-Fi adapter is picking up right now. We can see a lot of information about those, like the SSIDs and the channels and the signal strength and things like that. And the view on the bottom is what shows us the graph of all of the channels and where everything is in the spectrum. So let's go through these one at a time, and I'll show you exactly what these all do. I'm going to start out by going to physical mode because I want to show you what it looks like when we select a specific access point. So I'm going to sort these by signal strength because I want to find an access point that's close to me for an example. There's one in particular that I'm looking for here. Here's the 5 gigahertz radio for one that I really like. Since I'm in Idaho, I really like that we have an access point here named Potato. That's one of our neighbors. It's not us. So I'm actually going to filter down to all of the access points that are called Potato. So I'm just going to type in Potato up here and hit Enter, and we're going to filter down to that. Here we go. This is the one I was looking for. I want to see the 2.4 gigahertz access point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out that that label, and so now we can see what is going on. So we have selected Potato, and so we get to see some more information about this network. First off, there's a color scheme here that I want you to be aware of. If you look at blue, blue indicates what you currently have selected right now. So we currently have selected the Potato access point, and so everything that is colored blue references our specific selection. Like if you look at this section right here in blue, this is all information about the Potato access point. And if you look at this signal strength line in the signal strength over time graph right here, that blue one is the current one that we have selected. And if you look at the networks graph, this blue square right here is what represents the Potato access point. So you can see how there's a very consistent color scheme there, where blue always references the access point that is currently selected. The next color to be aware of is yellow. Yellow indicates any network that is on that's on the same channel. These are co-channel access points. So for example, here under the co-channel APs section, we can see that there are 13 access points that are on the same channel, and we can see that the strongest one is called branch associate guest. That's the strongest access point, and we can see, maybe a little bit hard to see right now, let me try making that a little bit bigger. We can see in the signal strength over time graph that there is a dotted line. That yellow dotted line shows the loudest co-channel network. And the final color is red. Red indicates any networks that are on partially overlapping channels. So let me make this graph a little bit bigger here. If we look, let's find something that's a little bit better. I think there's a network here called BBA that I want to pick on, so I'll filter down to BBA really quick and select that and then clear out the filter. BBA is on a really bad channel. BBA happens to be on channel 9, and it is causing adjacent channel interference with lots of other networks. And if we go to the network's details here and scroll down to the overlapping AP section, that's the section colored in red, we can see that this network is overlapping with 35 networks, and so it is causing a lot of adjacent channel interference, and it is receiving a lot of adjacent channel interference. Red indicates any network that is partially overlapping with your network, and the dotted red line in the signal strength graph shows us the loudest adjacent channel network. And so that's the thing to keep in mind, is blue is the current selected network, yellow is the loudest co-channel, or is all the co-channel access points, and red is all the overlapping access points. We tried to make it so that red would seem bad, so that you would avoid that as much as possible. So the next thing that we can do in physical mode is actually going to recommend a channel for us. If you look under the blue section here, we can actually see that our current channel right now is channel 9. but based on a lot of data, we're recommending that you go to channel 1 right now. This channel recommendation is based on a lot of information. It's based on the amount of access points that are on each channel, what all their signal strengths are, how they overlap with each other, and we're also pulling in that Wi-Spy data, which I'll get into a little later on. We're pulling in that Wi-Spy data so that we can tell how busy each channel actually is, so you can really quickly select the best channel for your wireless network. Now, if you have a multi-channel environment, you're likely going to want to go over to logical mode. In logical mode, this is that mode where we group together all of the access points that have the same name. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to type in MetaGeek, and we're just going to filter down to all the networks that are called MetaGeek. And so now we can see that we have two networks here. We have MetaGeek Development and just MetaGeek. So I'm going to click on MetaGeek and clear out my filter again, and you can go find that in the list manually if you'd like to, but I like to use the filtering tool. And so now what we've done is we have selected the entire group of access points that are called MetaGeek. So you can see we've got an access point on channel 1 and channel 6 and channel 11. We've got some up in the 5 gigahertz bands, and you can see all of those access points at the same time because they are all colored in blue. And again, the same coloring rules still apply. Any networks that are colored in red, like these ones over here, are ones that are doing adjacent channel interference, and any of the ones that are yellow are co-channel interferers. There's another thing that we can do here. We're listing all of those individual radios from all of the access points, and if we click on one of these, it'll do kind of a sub-selection. So if we click on Open Meeting 2, it'll actually highlight Open Meeting 2 in white. Maybe we can click on Open Meeting 1 since it's a bit louder, and we can actually see where that specific access point is. We also have expert analysis tips built into this view. Let's go find somebody that needs picking on. Obviously, our MetaGeek network is perfect because we're MetaGeek. So let's go back and find BBA again. BBA is just a great one to pick on. So if we go look at BBA in this mode, we'll get rid of our filter again so we can see how it overlaps with everything. We're actually getting some alerts for this particular network in the analysis section up here. So if we click on those, we can go in here and look at these alerts to see what they're saying. The first alert is that we have a configuration warning. There's an access point on this network is not set to a standard channel like 1, 6, or 11. Another configuration warning that we have is that this network is configured to support legacy 802.11b data rates, which can in some cases cause poor network performance. Now if you want to learn more about this, you can click on the Learn More link, and that'll open up a web browser and take you to a knowledge base article that will teach you more about that. There's also a security warning here as well, and this security warning says that WEP is enabled, which is a security risk. We can see that down here under the security section. We can see that WEP is enabled, and we've got a little broken lock icon. The reason for that is that WEP is a very broken encryption standard that's very, very easy to crack. A story that I like to tell is I went and visited my grandma a couple of years ago, and when I arrived, she was using WEP encryption for her Wi-Fi. And I said, hey, Grandma, can I have the password for your network? And she said, sure, I'll go find it for you. And so she went to rummage around the office and find the password, and before she got back, I was able to crack the wireless network. Not because I'm some crazy hacker or anything like that. To be honest, I'm not super good with the info security side of things, but because it's very, very easy to do. It's very, very well documented. So we'll give about 20 different types of warnings based on different conditions in your wireless network to help you configure the best settings for your network. Now, if we go back and look at this list of networks, another thing that I really like that you can do is there are shortcuts built in here where you can jump to specific radios that are on your wireless network. So if you wanted to go take a look at, say, the break area access point here, let's find somebody with a better signal strength. Maybe if you wanted to go look at data closet, if you click on this drill down button, that will jump you over to the physical details. So notice we just jumped back to physical mode, and now we are looking at data closet specifically. And what you can do with this channel recommendation is if you have a multiple access point network, you want to evenly distribute these access points on channels 1, 6, and 11 where possible. And the same goes to the 5 gigahertz band. You want to put them on 5 gigahertz channels, different 5 gigahertz channels, to make sure that your access points don't have to take turns talking with each other. What's the point of more access points if they still have to take turns talking with each other? And so one system that you can use here is you can plug in your first access point and look at the recommended channel and set it to that channel. And then go to your next access point, plug in that one, set it to the recommended channel, and keep doing that. And inSSIDer Office should evenly distribute them on channels 1, 6, or 11 unless one of those channels has an excessive amount of interference. Now, the last tab that we haven't talked about is the Channels tab. The Channels tab shows us all the information from the Wi-Spy specifically. So the physical and logical views mostly concentrate on Wi-Fi data, but the Channels tab is specifically all about Wi-Fi. So you notice that we've hidden all the wireless networks. One of my favorite things about this is we're able to use Wi-Spy data to tell you how busy each channel is. And there's two ways that we do this. The first way is down here in the channels graph. In this graph, we use height to tell you how loud something is talking. So the height of something tells you how loud it is. And the color tells you how often it's talking. So if you see blue, that means that there was a relatively short signal there, kind of like a clap. Listen to a clap. Does that really interrupt our webinar? No, not really. It doesn't really interrupt anything at all. But if we saw red, that would indicate that there was something generating constant activity there, kind of like an air horn. So you can see down here towards the bottom, down towards the bottom of this view, there's a little bit of red down here, and that indicates that something is talking there a lot. Whatever it is talking constantly. Think about an air horn for a second. If somebody walked into my office right now and blasted off an air horn, first off, I'd be kind of ticked off because I'm trying to give a webinar right now. Come on, man. And second, an air horn is a non-relenting signal. It is like a constant signal. It's not just short and then gone. It is constant. An air horn is something that doesn't let anything else talk, and that's exactly what red would indicate here. So blue indicates that something talked there, but it's only talking about 10% of the time. It's not talking very often at all. If you see green, then green means that, yeah, something talked there, but it's really only talking about 20% of the time, so it's still not talking very often. If you see red, then red indicates that something is talking there 50% of the time or more. Something is talking very, very often. And so the color tells you how often things are talking in the spectrum. You can also see how busy each channel is by looking at the channel utilization graph, or the channel utilization column. This shows you exactly how often each channel is being used. So right now, channel 1 is only being used about 12% of the time. That's relatively low. That means that that channel is pretty wide open for lots of other stuff. Whereas channel 11 is quite a bit busier. It's being used about 27% of the time and climbing. So you can really quickly get a look at how busy your wireless channel, how busy your wireless channels are just by looking at the channel utilization. Okay, a couple other quick tips and tricks in inSSIDer Office before we jump over to looking at Chanalyzer. All over the application, there are these little copy to clipboard buttons, and what these allow you to do is basically take a snapshot of whatever was happening there. So let's go back to our good friend Potato. We really like Potato, so we'll go click on Potato there to open him up, and we'll clear out that filter. We can take any of these images, and we can take them out to put them in another application. So if I click on the Copy to Clipboard button, I can open up, say, I've got a super professional image editing tool here called Paint. This is a great tool, and you've probably never used it before. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. You can take these images out. Anything in the software that looks like an image comes out as an image. You can paste it into custom reports or whatever it is you need to do for your documentation purposes, like Ahem was talking about earlier. Any text-based items are going to come out just like that. They're going to come out as text. So maybe we could filter down to MetaGeek, and maybe we could filter down to, we'll add Potato in there as well for good measure. And if we click on this Copy to Clipboard button here, and we take this over to yet another very professional, I've been using Mac too much. It's actually Notepad in Windows. If we go over here, we can paste this in here, and it comes out as a nice, neat table. You can paste this into Excel spreadsheets. They go in there beautifully. They're all formatted properly, and so you can really quickly create documentation. The last thing that I really like about inSSIDer Office before we move on to Chanalyzer is it's a great tool for doing coverage spot checks. It's a great way to make sure that you've got good basic coverage. So if we go to a specific access point, like maybe break area is going to be a pretty good one. Actually, let's find somebody with a better signal strength. We'll sort this by signal strength, and we'll go for OpenOffice 3. This is a nice one because it's really close by. We've got a good signal strength. In the signal strength over time graph, you remember how the blue line is the currently selected access point. We've got a signal strength threshold built into the software. So you can see where it says -70 right there. And we've got this dotted line that goes throughout the software. What you can do with this is you can walk around the desired coverage area and watch your signal strength. And if the signal strength goes down below that dotted line, so if we saw that that this signal strength dipped down below the dotted line, then we would know, okay, we have got a coverage problem right there. There's a spot where we don't have good enough coverage. Maybe we need to move an access point. Maybe we need to make transmit power adjustments. Maybe we need to add another access point, and then you can use that to ensure that you that you've got good coverage all over the place. Now you can adjust that signal strength threshold. There's many adjustments that you can make to that. My kind of cheat sheet for this is this one right here. When I look at different signal strengths, this is kind of Joel's opinions about what signal strengths should be. Other engineers might have differing opinions on what these signal strengths should be. So if somebody else says that it should be slightly different, that's probably fine. Everybody's going to have slightly differing opinions on this. But these are kind of the signal strengths that I like to hit. Negative 30 dBm, I kind of consider that to be the maximum achievable signal strength. It's not necessarily a good thing. It just means you're right next to the access point. Negative 67 dBm is what I consider to be the minimum for applications that require timely packet delivery. Think things like voice over IP, you're streaming video. My voice is coming to you over IP right now. And if those packets got out of order, or if we had to repeat ourselves a whole bunch to send those packets, I'd start to sound like a robot, right? So if I was doing this over Wi-Fi, and I'm not, I'd want to make sure that I had negative 67 dBm or better. Negative 70 is what I consider to be the minimum for reliable packet delivery. Think things like email and web. It's not going to be quite as slick as negative 67 dBm, but it's still going to be pretty reliable. Things like Snapchat, Facebook, things like that are going to work pretty well. Negative 80 dBm is where things are going to start to go downhill. You're going to have basic connectivity, but it's going to be kind of unreliable. At negative 80 dBm, I did a speed test at the in-laws the other day, and I was getting about negative 80 dBm in signal strength. And at that signal strength, I was only able to maintain about 2 megabits per second, so it didn't work very well at all. At negative 90 dBm, you are basically approaching the noise floor. Any functionality is going to be pretty unlikely. So what you can do with this software is you can get in here and you can actually configure your signal strength threshold by going to settings and going to signal threshold, and then you can make those adjustments to whatever signal strength that you need to do those coverage checks. Okay, so we've talked about inSSIDer Office. Let's take a look and let's think about non-Wi-Fi interference here for a few moments before we look at Chanalyzer and wrap up the webinar. We have to think about non-Wi-Fi interference as well, because non-Wi-Fi interference functions a lot like Wi-Fi interference in that, remember, only one device can talk on a channel at a time. If you throw a few frozen burritos in the microwave oven is a classic example of a non-Wi-Fi interference, because it's going to start just essentially spewing garbage out into the spectrum. And when it does that, remember that only one device can talk on a channel at a time. All of our very, very polite Wi-Fi devices are just going to be quiet and wait for their turn to talk, because they know that they're not going to be able to transmit if there's something causing interference on their channel. This can be interference from anything. It can be interference from cordless phones or wireless video cameras or microwave ovens. Non-802.11 devices also need time to talk. And the problem with these non-802.11 devices is that they will essentially start spewing garbage out onto the channel, and they will and whenever they start talking on a channel, non or Wi-Fi devices are going to struggle because they will not be able to get a word in while those devices are transmitting, and so we've got to watch out for that. And so the tool for that is Chanalyzer and the Wi-Spy. With Chanalyzer, think of this as a more advanced version of inSSIDer Office. With this tool, you can discover, identify, and get rid of non-Wi-Fi interference. You can see non-Wi-Fi devices that are normally invisible. You can identify what type of devices is causing interference. You can locate the non-Wi-Fi interference physically and use the device finder function to track it down and actually get rid of it. And so with that, let's go ahead and take a look at Chanalyzer in a live demo. Give me just 1 second to switch over to that. So just take one moment. And for those of you, a couple of you may have experienced audio issues. We do apologize for that. We've heard some reports from GoToWebinar. That's Citrix. Citrix is the company that hosts GoToWebinar. They have been fighting some audio quality issues today. It does seem like it's working fairly well now, but if you do experience a problem, I do apologize for that. Okay, so now we've got Chanalyzer running, and the first thing that you'll notice is that there's a lot more data here. There's a lot more going on. Chanalyzer kind of relies on you understanding the data and knowing what to do with it, but it gives a lot more detail. So this view is probably going to look very, very familiar to you. It's going to look just like that view that we just saw with inSSIDer Office. Remember, this is that view that shows us how often things are talking in the spectrum. So it shows us all of the raw radio frequency activity. Wi-Fi scanning is still here as well. If we go up here and check the networks button and go down to the networks table, we can individually decide which networks we want to show or not show in the spectrum. So I'm actually going to get rid of everything except the MetaGeek network, because those are the access points that I am currently defending right now. Those are the access points that I care about. So if we see a source of non-Wi-Fi interference pop up, it's going to show up very, very quickly in Chanalyzer. And so what what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and click on networks to hide that, and now we can see that there is this spike shape that is showing up in the spectrum right here between channels 1 and 2. And if we look at our networks, we can see that that is completely flooding out our access points on channel 1. That's going to be very, very problematic. So let's say that we need to figure out what kind of device this is. What kind of device is this thing? Well, let's figure it out. To do that, we're going to go down here to the Interferers tab, and this is a library of common shapes that you might see in the spectrum. This is a whole bunch of different things like AV transmitters and cordless phones and all these different things. So what you can do with these is you can compare them by simply looking to see if they match. And if that's hard, if that's kind of difficult, what you can do is you can click on those, just a single click, and hover your mouse up here, and that shape will follow you into the spectrum. Now I can see that this probably isn't an AV transmitter. The center spike matches pretty well, but those two spikes on the left and the right, they don't match at all, so that's probably not it. It doesn't look like a Nortec video device either, so that's probably not it, but it does look suspiciously like this Uniden cordless phone shape. That matches up pretty well, and so I'll bet that that's a Uniden cordless phone. So now that we have an idea of what to look out for, let's go hunt it down. To track it down, we're going to click and drag over this shape in the spectrum like this. We're just going to click and drag, and when we release our mouse button, we're going to click on Device Finder, and that's going to open up Device Finder mode. So we'll hit the checkbox to get started, and that's going to give us a signal strength graph for this device. So we'll see that signal strength go up and down as we move closer to and further away from that device. If we get closer, we'll see the signal strength go up. If we move further away, we'll see the signal strength go down. Until pretty soon, you'll get to the point where you have a pretty good idea of which direction this device is in. And as you move closer and closer and closer to it, you'll see that signal strength continue to go up and up and up until finally you're standing in the same room as that device and you can see it. And as soon as you find it, sure enough, it was a cordless phone. It's funny, it's a cordless phone every time I do this demo. If you hit the end button on the cordless phone, you'll see it completely stop transmitting. You'll see that line fall to the floor because that cordless phone is gone and dead. It is no longer transmitting. There's a ton of other things I'd love to be able to show you in Chanalyzer, like there's a beautiful ways that you can save off these recordings and play them back later. There's all kinds of tools for taking notes in here. There's lots of advanced things that you can do with the Wi-Fi scanning, and there's even a great report builder that you can use to build out custom reports that you can export to a PDF. Lots and lots of functionality here. This is really the professional spectrum analyzer out there that will give you the most information and the most powerful reporting capabilities. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to skip back over the slides, and I want to show you some examples of different things that you might see in the spectrum. This is what 802.11b looks like. This means that we've fallen back to a legacy data rate like 1 or 2 or 5.5 or 11 megabits per second. And this is a sign that things could be performing a lot better. 802.11b makes a curve shape in the spectrum. That's the giveaway, is that you will see a curve if we drop back down to 802.11b data rates or if we have an 802.11b device on our network. More commonly, you're going to see this flat tabletop shape. This flat tabletop shape is the shape that both 802.11g and 802.11n make. If you've ever wondered what Wi-Fi looks like, this is it. This is what it actually looks like. This means that we're using a faster data rate. This is a data rate like 6 or 12 or 24 or 54 megabits per second and beyond. Now, I didn't get a chance to show you the 5 gigahertz band, but this is a screenshot from 5 gigahertz. This is what 802.11a and 802.11n look like. Now, don't be fooled. This shape right here, this is another 802.11a or 802.11n shape, and it's the same 20 megahertz wide channels, but since the 5 gigahertz band is so huge in comparison, we have to squish it way down to fit it on the screen. It's still the same flat tabletop shape with those shoulders down each side. The 5 gigahertz is absolutely huge in comparison to 2.4. To kind of make a comparison between the two, if we draw a box right here, that shows how big the 2.4 gigahertz band is in comparison to the entire 5 gigahertz band. There's just a lot more space there. The next example, this is one of my favorites. In fact, I think it is my favorite. This is a baby monitor, and what's frustrating about this baby monitor is that it is a frequency hopping device. So this view down here, I didn't really get into this view a whole lot just for the sake of time since we're reviewing 2 products in one webinar, but this view shows us what's happening over time. So we can see that this baby monitor, it started out right here on channel 5. And it hung out there on channel 5 for about 4 seconds or so, and then it hopped all the way over here to channel 9. And so then it hung out there on channel 9 for another 4 seconds or so. You can see the shape that it made in the density view right there. And then it hopped all the way over here to channel 1. And if we look very closely at channel 1, you'll notice that there's kind of a flat tabletop shape right there. What's that all about? Well, if you look closely, you realize that there's an 802.11g wireless network on that channel. And every time this baby monitor hops onto the same channel as that wireless network, it is going to completely disable that network. And based on the behavior of this baby monitor so far, by looking how it moves around, my guess is it's not going to stay on that channel for very long. So it's going to hop on and off of that channel all day long, which is going to cause the Wi-Fi to work, and then it won't work, and then it will work, and then it won't work. And so it can be very, very problematic. Here's another example of another type of frequency hopping device, but this is Bluetooth. Bluetooth is a fast frequency hopping device. It rapidly hops from channel to channel to channel. And you can tell that this is all the same device that's hopping around because each one of these spikes is the exact same height and they all look identical. So this is the same device that is quickly moving around all over the place. Now, Bluetooth likes to get a pretty bad rap. A lot of people blame Bluetooth for interference problems, but in this example, you can see that the Bluetooth is actually blue. Don't worry, it's pure coincidence. They didn't name it after our tool. I totally wish they did, though. That would have been awesome. But we can see that, that it's only blue, which means it's talking 10% of the time or less. That typically means that it's not going to cause a significant amount of interference with Wi-Fi. Here's another example of a frequency hopping device. This is what Xbox 360 controllers look like. Again, this is a frequency hopping device that moves around. You can tell they're all the same height, and each one of these spikes is pretty much the same shape. And you can tell that this is not going to cause a significant amount of interference because the color is blue, which means it's not talking very often. Typically, a single Xbox 360 and a few Xbox controllers aren't going to cause a significant amount of interference unless you're an Xbox 360 game developer and you've got 200 Xbox 360s all in the same room. A couple of years ago, I talked to an Xbox 360 game developer, and they were in the process of developing the next flagship title for the Xbox 360. It was the end of a big series of games for the Xbox 360, and they had a couple hundred of these in one room, a couple hundred Xbox 360s all in one room. These spikes were not blue. They were dark red. They completely saturated the spectrum with all those Xbox 360s, and they weren't able to use the 2.4 gigahertz band for Wi-Fi at all. And here's the last example of the day before I hand it back over. This is what an analog wireless video camera looks like. These are a very distinctive shape. They have this distinctive 3 spikes, and notice that it is dark red. These utilize the band very, very heavily. They cause heavy utilization. And fortunately, we don't see these as often as we used to. These used to be marketed as X10 wireless video cameras, as well as a few other names, but fortunately, we don't see them super often, but you still will come across one from time to time, and they can be extremely damaging for a wireless network. All right, I think I'm ready to hand it back to, I'm not sure if it's Heidi or Ahem, but go ahead.
Thanks, Joel. I'll take it back from here. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed all the details that Joel went over. It's very informative for sure. But before we wrap it up, I just want to remind the packages that we have that we partnered with MetaGeek for. Get the basic package, the professional package, the advanced package, and heat mapping software as Demograph Pro. So Joel went over the inSSIDer Office software and the Chanalyzer software. Chanalyzer being the professional one has all the bells and whistles that you need for your spectrum analysis job. But both of them work in the package. We offer the Wi-Spy DBX dongle. It's a USB dongle that you can plug into your computer, and it sniffs out 2.4 and 5 gigahertz channels simultaneously. Please check them out. The good news is that if you buy on the store, you will get 10% off of MSRP, so you have the option to go to MetaGeek.com and pay 10% more, or you can go to the store and pay 10% less for the same solution, basically. But the next session with Joel will be mid-August, and we'll send email invites for that, and we will cover the advanced package, and we'll dive into the IPA, which is very, very advanced. So if you have network professionals on your staff, your techs, I would highly recommend get your network staff or your techs to attend that webinar because it will be very, very informative and very technical. A quick reminder of our lineup for Arachnist networks. We have a full lineup of indoor access points, 100, 300, 500, and 700 series. the 100 and 300 being wireless N, the 500 and 700 being wireless AC. 100 is the only product in the lineup that is single band. Everything else is dual band, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. All the products are high power, and all the products support standard PoE. They support fast roaming, and they all come cloud managed through our overseas cloud portal. With that being said, I will leave it to Heidi to ask a couple of questions. I've tried to answer most of them, but we have a couple probably that need to be answered by Joel.
All right, thanks guys. We're almost out of time, but we'll try to squeeze in just a couple of questions. One of the most popular ones was around Mac versions. Is the software compatible with Mac, or is there a separate Mac version? Joel, can you help the guys out with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Chanalyzer, unfortunately, there is not a Mac version. Now, if you're really sharp, if you were paying close attention, you may have noticed I am presenting on a Mac. We're all Mac users here at MetaGeek, and we want more and more Mac users out there because we absolutely love Mac. Unfortunately, Chanalyzer is not available on Mac at this time. I was running it in a VMware virtual machine when I was demoing it for you with a USB Wi-Fi adapter and a Wi-Spy, and we find that that works pretty well. We all do that here at MetaGeek. inSSIDer Office, though, is a little bit different. We do offer a Mac version of inSSIDer Office, and it is currently in beta. It's got about 90% of the features. There's a few small bugs, but we're kind of using it as a test to see how many customers are interested in using Mac. We're always measuring that to see if it makes sense for us to go ahead and start developing full-time on Mac. So like I said, it is in beta. It's not perfect, but if you purchase inSSIDer Office for Windows, the license key will automatically activate the Mac version as well. So one license key activates both the Windows stable version as well as the Mac beta.
Okay, let's see. Next question from Jake. Can the Chanalyzer see Z-Wave devices?
That's a great question. I believe that Z-Wave is down in the 900 megahertz band. I may be incorrect about that. So I don't think that if it's down the 900 megahertz band like I suspect, we can't see that because Chanalyzer looks at the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz bands.
Okie dokie. And last question. Let's find the good one here. Can you talk about why you would need to use both inSSIDer Office and Chanalyzer?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I like to use inSSIDer Office for doing channel planning and for doing coverage checks because not only does it have that signal strength threshold feature for doing the coverage checks, but it also has the recommended channel feature. And sometimes, even though I have both of those tools available, I flip back and forth between them all the time because I like how Chanalyzer gives me a lot more flexibility to drill down into things and look at a lot of complex data, but I also like how inSSIDer Office will just break some of that data down for you. For example, it'll color all of the adjacent channel networks in red and just give you a recommended channel number. So I use both. I go back and forth all the time.
All right, well that's all we have time for today, but I want to thank everyone for joining us again and remind you to be on the lookout for a follow-up email within the next couple of days. That's going to have a link to a recording of today's session and also a $50 off coupon code for any of the 3 MetaGeek packages, the Basic, Pro, or Advanced. And as Aham mentioned, we do have a second webinar coming up. That will be on August 11th, I believe at 3 p.m. Eastern. And Joel will be going over MetaGeek's IPA packet analysis software, which is included in the advanced package. And the follow-up email will include a link for you to sign up for that session as well. And again, thanks for joining us and hope you have a great day. Thanks.